It seems attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. So how are teachers supposed to keep students engaged and participating in their lessons? Well, in this video, I am sharing my tried and true strategies that you can add to your lessons tomorrow. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent, and I love sharing ways to simplify your classroom and your teaching. On average, an attention span for someone is about 1 minute per year of life. So my fourth graders are 9 and 10 years old. So their attention spans are about 9 to 10 minutes long. And when you think about that as a teacher, you can maybe get a good lesson in. But most of the time, especially with some of the more complex topics and content, it takes longer than 10 minutes to teach what I need to teach. And if you teach a grade that's younger than that, your attention spans for your students are even smaller. So the easiest way to combat that is when you have a longer lesson, add variety to your lessons so that you are changing what you're doing every 10 minutes so that your students' attentions kind of follow with it. Another way to really make that work is to think about your lessons as an I do, we do, you do. So I do is the teacher sharing, and you can use different strategies in that I do of modeling how to do something, and then have students doing it together. Maybe it's together with a class or with partners, something that changes that attention, and then the you do is the independent, them doing it by themselves. And keeping that simple routine will actually make your lesson planning easier. Hit that like button if you're like me and you like anything that will make your life easier. So one of my goals this year in teaching has been trying to keep students participating and engaged in the lesson. And so one of the things I love to do is a think, pair, share. This works really well with math problems. You give them a more complicated math problem and have them think on their own. If it is a simpler problem, I might just have them think about the answer or solve it themselves. So the think part is them working independently, them trying to solve the problem by themselves. And then the pairing is when they either get with a partner or a group, and then they discuss how they solved the problem. They help each other for those students who didn't quite get the problem, but they're talking about maybe different strategies of how they solved the problem. And then sharing, they share out all the different ways that they solved that math problem. So you can take one problem and stretch it out over a chunk of time and not have to worry about those attention spans because they only have a short amount of time that they're doing the thinking, the pairing, and then the sharing. Another really easy way is just the simple turn and talk. I use this a lot when we are doing a whole group lesson. I will propose a question to them and then they will turn and talk with a partner and then we'll all share out. This really helps for a class that likes to talk. It gives them that time to talk, but it's academic based. I use this a lot with our word study when we're talking about different words. I'll say, turn and talk to a partner about a time that you felt discouraged. Maybe our prefix was dis, and so we're talking about words with the prefix dis, and so they're talking to each other about a time. It pulls in some of that SEL, and it just makes for a quick overall way for students to participate. Instead of me just talking to them and one kid answering a question each time, you have the whole class engaged in that conversation. Another strategy that doesn't seem like it would increase your engagement and participation is wait time. I actually call it think time with my students because that's what I want them doing when I'm asking a question, because kids are so used to, as soon as you ask a question, they're immediately throwing their hand up. And the kids who it comes to easy or quickly, they are like the ooh, me, and then it distracts the other students from being able to think through it, or they don't even try to think through it because they're like, oh, somebody else has the answer, why even bother? Implementing think time, I tell them they can't put any hands up. They just have to think. If you already know the answer, just think about your answer and think about how you can give your answer in a complete sentence to give their brain something else to do while we're thinking. But I will literally hold my hand up and say, this is think time. I might even count down on my fingers so that when we first started, that's what I did. I don't quite do it as much anymore, but it just gives everyone time to think. I have more students participating when I give them that think time because of all the different things I said, where the kids who would normally just not even try because somebody else has their hand up actually have time to think about the answer. When it's a longer lesson, I really try to involve some sort of movement. whether that's us moving to a different area of the classroom or something as simple as they're in their seats working on a math problem, and then where it's time for us to share answers, I'll have them stand up if you got A, sit down down if you got B, or some sort of way to just get them kind of moving. It gets that blood flowing in their brains and just gives them that attention, something else to sort of think about instead of this lesson that feels like it's going on and on and on. Hand signals are also a great way to get your whole class participating. They can do the simple I agree, where they just hold up thumb and a pinky and agree with somebody's answer. That way they're listening to others give the answer and agreeing. Or if they don't agree, they can raise their hand and tell us why. Or even simple things when you're learning different vocabulary, having movements. I like to use it with geometry. Maybe we talk about a point or we talk about an angle. I also love using repetition, because once you sort of start it, some kids catch on, but eventually, especially if you've been doing it all year at this point in the year, they know it. I get a lot of these ideas from teachers who teach the younger kids. They do this a lot, but it's a great strategy to use in the upper grades as well. Maylene Call from Mrs. Call's Camper, I'll link her YouTube channel below. She is an amazing first grade teacher, and I will take some of her strategies and use them with my fourth graders. I love the characters have problems, and so every time I say characters have, my students call back with problems. So we're constantly talking about there's always a problem in a story. Or character traits, and we put it over our heart, character traits, just to help them keep those vocabulary words, those thoughts and ideas in their head, and it kind of refocus them if their brain starts to wander or if they're thinking about something else to, okay, we're about to talk about characters. When I want to make sure that I am including these strategies into my lessons, I have to find ways to keep it at the top of my mind, because we get in such a routine and a way of doing things that sometimes we just forget to add these things. So I try to think ahead of time which questions I'm going to do a think, pair, share with, or a turn and talk, and then I build it into my teaching slides, because pretty much every subject I teach these days I use teaching slides with, and so it helps to guide my lesson. So I just add those questions and those strategies, the think, pair, share, the turn and talk, right into my daily teaching slides. I also use the I do, we do, you do to help guide what kinds of participation strategies I'm going to use. So in the I do portion, the teacher teaching, teacher directed, I include a lot of the hand signals, a lot of the wait time, the think time, and then any movement into that part of the lesson. In the we do, where I'm doing it with the students, we're all doing it together, there's a lot of that turn and talk and that think, pair, share time to where they're collaborating on the questions. And then the you do, where they are independently solving a problem. Turning talk is the strategy I like to use the most, because I want everyone to share their answers, even though I'm only going to call on a couple of students. But again, trying to remember all of that while remembering everything else you have to remember while you're teaching can get a little overwhelming. So adding them to my teaching slides really has been the biggest game changer for me. You can grab these templates below in my TPT store to add them to your teaching slides. These strategies are great ways to increase student participation and engagement quickly into your lesson. But my favorite way to get that buy-in factor from my students is by playing games. The video that's on your screen now shares some simple games to add to your lessons to get your students excited about learning.